Well, how do we say this? Ted Lasso is a hugely popular sitcom that generally unites young and old soccer fans and soccer ignorers, soccer haters. We're going to talk about the relationship to that, to our relationship to the U.S. men's national team. Which, if you've been living under the rock, perhaps you don't know what we're talking about, but we'll get into that. And it's Valentine's Day, which means we're also going to show some love to some people. And Jimmy and I are going to share the love around some players and people and things involved in the U.S. men's national team landscape that we want to talk about. The USMNT Hour begins right now. Now, everyone, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Qué Golazo channel on YouTube. Follow at Qué Golazo on social media. And make sure you're following Jimmy and I. And even our producer, Des Norris, on Twitter. He's got a really funny Twitter handle. I'll let him post it in our chat if he wants us to share it, because sometimes they like to stay in the background a little bit and avoid some of the well-deserved at times criticisms that come at some of us that put our faces in the firing range. Jimmy Conrad, what is going on, man?
What's going on, Heath? Great to see you. Great to see everybody that are regulars with our community that are hanging out with us today on this beautiful Monday, Valentine's Day. I'm feeling the love. I had a birthday this past weekend. That's my early flex, and it was pretty cool to kind of receive all the positivity. And it's almost like people are talking about you. Like, if you died, you now have a pretty good idea of what they would be saying about you. Yeah. Like, oh, this great guy, super handsome and charming. I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. I'm good with that.
Hey,
no, it's good.
Jimmy, I've actually got a theory that I've come up with recently around your birthday, right? That your birthday just falls between the Super Bowl and Valentine's Day, which is somewhere around there. It's a lot to kind of gather, right? It's like having December 26th be your birthday. It's a little bit tough between New Year's and Christmas and holidays, depending on what you celebrate. And I feel like soccer was your pathway because of the fact that this was the only way you were going to get the attention you needed, right? It wasn't going to come on your birthday because, I mean, come on, we're planning for a Super Bowl. And it also wasn't going to come on Valentine's Day. You weren't going to get the presents that you needed as you got older. So you went the soccer route, which was a rocky road, but you made it, Jimmy. You got there. So I mean, you could poke holes in that theory. Just wanted to start off the top by
there's nothing to poke.
I'm on to you.
I appreciate that. I was definitely playing 4-dimensional chess when I was a younger kid. I could see it all play out, and here we are. Look at this. Yeah. And now we're talking about the beautiful game and around some evolutions ultimately, Heath, with regard to how our players are being perceived globally, which I think is changing for the better, but maybe not our coaches. And I know you brought up the Ted Lasso stuff. So what are we saying here about this?
Yeah. So obviously the Ted Lasso situation, Chris Armas has been referred to, some claiming jokingly, but for all intents and purposes, degradingly, if that's a word, about Chris Armas, right? He's never managed abroad. He's managed the New York Red Bulls. He's been involved in the U.S. national team setup at times. He was a former player at a very high level. Jimmy, do you think, I guess just off the bat, right? And we talked about this a little bit already, but I feel like Ted Lasso is just, it's reached the heights of pop culture. So it's always going to be relevant in any situation, right? Imagine Will Ferrell, who's an owner of LAFC, goes out to the training grounds. I'm sure he gets the Ted Lasso sort of treatment of just like saying that, or he claims he's Ted Lasso, or he's worse than, like, it's pop culture level. And so from the start, do you think that there's deeper layers to this? People have been calling it old fashioned, the way that they go about training. Chris Armas doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't remember which of the Nevilles. I think it was Gary Neville.
Gary Neville, he came out, disrespectful, disgusting, and just another sign of how bad these players are and their attitudes, towards the team. I don't know. It's hard to know.
I guess. Okay. Let me reframe the question then. Take the him being American. I mean, take the Ted Lasso part out of it.
Okay.
How much do you think of how they judge him is based on being American versus him being the type of manager that they like or are expecting or wanting, right? Each player is going to want somebody different. But how much of that do you think is that American bias? And we'll talk about the player side of it. But
I think it's quite strong. And there's really no track record that warrants why you would give this person instant respect. Not only in particular to Chris Armas's career, but just in general. Okay, Bruce Arenas had a illustrious career, probably our best U.S. men's national team manager of all time. Some people might roll their eyes to that, but I think the proof's in the pudding there, right? Got us to a quarterfinal and obviously produced some incredible results during his time, and obviously has the blemish of not qualifying in 2018 that he's going to have to reconcile with his career. But obviously the most successful MLS manager, did it in college as well. I mean, the guy's track record is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
He actually never took that step over to Europe. We have Bob Bradley, who did, right? He went to take the Egyptian national team.
But isn't that a bizarre thing just for anybody to comprehend, Jimmy, if somebody was coming through the ranks, and maybe there's a Jurgen Klopp story in there? Because if you look at a lot of those managers, they came from pretty bizarre places and backgrounds, right? But they came from footballing nations. But you talk about Bruce Arena, and like, yeah, he was a champion as a coach in college. If you were a player at Man United hearing that sort of resume, wouldn't you sort of be like, I don't get it?
Yes, yeah, of course. I mean, and then I guess it's just like, okay, so we have Bob Bradley, and he does what you should do. He goes down to a smaller league and kind of earns his opportunities. Then he goes to League Two and starts to have some success there and to build the culture. He's very good at that.
Berhalter did as well. Started at Hammarby.
That's true. That's right. That's right. And Hammarby was owned by Anschutz at that point. So once he retired, it's owned by an American owner, and you're given some opportunities. Now, he got fired from Hammarby. We should throw that out there as well, so we're not trying to sugarcoat any of that. And then Bob gets 85 days with Swansea, and he ends up getting the same type of treatment. And Bob's not probably the best interview. He can be a little bit prickly, and I could see why being under the spotlight of a Premier League manager could have been, maybe didn't jive with what he brings to the table. He just wants to coach. The guy just wants to coach. He doesn't want to worry about any of the other crap, and I like that about him. I mean, he's got his focus and he gets after it. And I think you and I would both love that part of it as being a coach. Like, who's got questions for me, and we would have fun with it, and I think that would almost, because we would have that type of personality, we would probably be called Ted Lasso. We're going to now be compared to Ted Lasso. Then you have Jesse Marsch, who did RB Salzburg and kind of earned his stripes, was an assistant at Leipzig, then went back, didn't do well. There's no really out American manager that's, I think, blown anybody away. And until that happens, I think you're going to get that stereotype from a coaching perspective. Now, the player perspective is changing, and that's awesome, and it's great to see.
Now, doesn't it seem, by the way, before we get to the player,
yeah.
I mean, David Wagner just seems to be the hybrid approach where nobody's really going out on a limb just because of his German roots. Of it doesn't seem to be, it's kind of that whole like bias of like American versus like, yeah, but he's not from the American system,
Right. No. I think the same thing with Pellegrino Matarazzo, who's the coach at Stuttgart. We don't even really talk about him. He's our age, Heath. And, he worked at Nuremberg's youth academy. He coached the juniors there. He shared a room with Julian Nagelsmann, when they were getting their coaching licenses. Like, he's got all these, I don't know, these little moments of credibility that I think gives him something over the American managers that are coming from our country and that kind of earned our stripes. Yeah,
imported versus sort of cutting their teeth through the quote unquote traditional system of licensing and look, Jesse's got his, I think, UEFA A, and I think Bob has his UEFA A. I think you need to have those licenses after a while to even coach. I think that was a Jurgen Klinsmann issue for him keeping or holding that I believe was the Hertha Berlin job. But do you think, I mean, how much of it is just that sort of, oh, you came from this place where it's like, we've heard about these silly rules where our managers have gone and they've struggled because you have these weird things where they make up rules and they make up budgets and you have all this bizarre thing and you play a weird calendar and, you have conferences and you like, how much of that is just sort of bought into as the lazy take for somebody before they even give them a chance versus actually just being like, hey, Chris Armas is a crap coach.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. What I'll say is that Chris Armas as an assistant has been actually pretty good. He was with Jesse Marsch at Red Bull, and they had a lot of success under Jesse Marsch. I think, and I know Chris probably a little bit better than you do, Heath, given some of my experience with the national team and him being my teammate. And I always got a nice assistant coach vibe from him. To be the head coach is like just a different step. It's a different personality that I think you have to be able to do all that. And Chris, I think very similar to Bob, man, they just want to focus on the game. They don't really want to focus about all the other stuff that comes with the job. And maybe that's what sidetracked Chris a little bit and always having to go answer these questions at the press conference. You can see that just drives Bob crazy. Now, Chris as a head coach didn't do very well at the Red Bulls, got fired by Toronto FC. Josie Altidore and him got into it, and it just didn't end well. And now he's taking that step away from that situation, his next step is as an assistant under Ralph Rangnick that's leading training for Manchester United.
And by the way,
I can understand why the players are like, wait, what? You know, and it's an easy joke to call him Ted Lasso because I know Chris, he's a positive guy. He's going to try to get the most out of the players. He'll win them over. But if they're not getting results, then they're going to make him a topic and not a topic, but a target for their anger. And maybe because Rangnick isn't taking in a lot of trainings, he becomes even more of a target. Like, well, it's because we have this guy as our coach, you know, and that feels a little unfair.
Yeah, I think, and for people's understanding, right, that also the English managerial system is very different, right? Where, at least from my understanding, a lot of managers actually don't run the training sessions, right? They're managerial. They might be off to the distance. They build the team shape. They help put together the things, but they're more little hands off. And the first assistant runs the sessions. They're hands on. They're much more. Whereas, at least in my experience, Jimmy, with most of my assistant coaches, and you had you had your main assistant, you had a couple other assistants that were maybe further down the pecking order. They were involved, but they didn't have a lot of power. They didn't have a lot of, I don't know, responsibilities. They played a role in helping the team. They were more approachable. They were likable. They had relationships with the players more directly, but it still there was still this hands-on approach from coaches where the coaches ran the session, the head coach. Whereas in England, you kind of have that first assistant has, I think, a lot more responsibility than most first assistants would have in Major League Soccer. Do you feel, am I understanding that differently? Just at least in my interpretation of how a lot of managers operate there, the first assistant seems to have a lot of power and responsibility and touch points, less so the way my assistant coaches would have, where they're a little friendlier. They're a little bit like they play good cop, you know, and they're meant to be sort of a hand on the back and sort of give you the insights of what's going on in the office of the coaching staff and kind of give you a little bit more than what a coach who's talking holistically to the team might give you.
No, it's a great point. I think that the role of assistant is much different here in the States. That, to your point, they're kind of the arm around the shoulder that if things aren't going well, if you're not the first choice, or even if you are, and you can sense that the main guy's not giving you all that love, then the assistant will come in and kind of fill that gap, fill the void for you, and give you some insight that, and maybe is being tasked with that situation, right? So if the head coach is like, hey, you know, why don't you go say something to Heath over there? He looks like he's a little bit down. You know, maybe you can pep him, whatever it may be, right? There's a little bit more of that relationship, I think, that maybe exists more here in the States than it does anywhere else with the role that's being built, at least in Europe, with the role of the first team coach, right? I'm like usually called a first team coach and not the assistant. So yeah. I wonder how that plays, because obviously Armas would then be walking into a situation that he might not be as familiar with as well, and kind of Rangnick leaving him out to dry in some capacity. Like, well, we're not scoring because we have an American running our practices. Yeah, it's such a dumb thing. Like, how about you just score your goddamn chances and don't miss penalties, Cristiano? You know,
I will say this: Chris Armas. I got a chance when I was 18. It was I took a semester off of school because we had the U20 World Cup. It ended up getting postponed for 6 months, so I had to take a semester off of school. And I was training in Bradenton, Florida with any of the MLS teams that came around. I got to train with Chicago Fire. And Chris Armas was the best 5v2 player that played with up at that point. Like, I was mesmerized watching him sometimes we play 5v2 or rondo as they call it, you know, or 4v2 in really tight spaces, just his awareness to move the ball around. I was actually really impressed. And that was the only time I ever got to interact with him. He won't even remember that. I was just there for a couple of days. And I just remember that being an actual thing in my memory, in my brain, when I was trying to say, hey, I want to play professionally. I was just like, dude, these guys are so much better than me. I've got so far to go. I've got so much to be able to do. And I remember one of the assistant coaches continuously telling me, stop backing up from the line, like giving yourself space, like stay up to the line and create your angles with the way you shift your body and where the answers are. And I was just like, I got to back up because I need more space to create bigger angles for me. And I just remember that being sort of the bar of what I needed to get to, and an inspiration for me. So at least as a player, for people that don't remember, Chris Armas was a hell of a player and a hell of a part of the U.S. men's national team of the past.
And part of the core. I mean, ultimately he got hurt before the 2002 World Cup, tore his knee in one of the friendly games leading up to the World Cup itself. And that's what allowed Pablo Mastroianni to step in and have the career that he had. Armas then got himself hurt again ahead of 2006, and he missed 2 World Cups that he probably would have started in, all things considered. So we're talking about a player that would have been very, very decorated and just has one of those sad stories that never really got to reach his full potential and play at the highest of levels to prove that he could. So yeah, I guess that would have been nice. If he could have walked in and said, "Hey, I played in 2 World Cups," I just think that maybe would have changed the perspective of some of the players as well. But ultimately, I think this comes down to, you and I have been a part of it. If you're in a locker room that's a bit toxic and there's been a lack of direction and there's a coaching change and nobody really knows and the new guy's making you work harder than you want, you're just going to start to bitch a little bit. And when that happens, you start to find different symbols of and targets of your frustration. And if you're not scoring or playing well, the easy thing is to throw to the scapegoat. And in this particular instance, it's Chris Armas, because I think Rangnick is staying above it. Now, Rangnick, when asked about these Ted Lasso comments, said, "I don't read articles and I don't really watch TV. I don't really know what they're, I don't even know what's going on per se. All I'm focusing on is to make sure that we're better. And defensively, we've gotten better. And attacking wise, we're creating enough chances to score, and we just have to finish those chances." It is quite simple, but as you know, the game becomes quite emotional if you're not getting the results that you want. And if that emotion starts to seep into the team, as it clearly is, then that can throw off a team very quickly, especially as one as talented as Manchester United.
He did say also, like, no, it's not like old school. We do rondos in training and things like that. Like, he threw out this idea of like, no, I'm fun. Look, like I've got a book collection,
I've never seen that.
And by the way, for anybody that's just tuning in or has been watching this for the entire show, we appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed to the Qué Golazo YouTube channel, and make sure you smash that like button. That thumbs up gets it out to everybody else, and they get to join the show and take part in these conversations. Keep those conversations or those comments or questions coming in. We'll throw those up on the screen. We'll try to answer them, but we'll make sure that producer Des throws them up. By the way, if you want to follow producer Des, his handle is @Partido which is pretty funny. Very clever. Very clever. So give him a follow, and then or just attack him. If you're ever frustrated with us, just go after him. Just know, it gives us somebody else to blame. You talk about scapegoats. That's what we're looking for.
He's our Chris Armas.
Yeah, Jimmy. Now we were getting to it a little bit earlier about. I'm holding this. Like this is a
hey, whatever
a stain pen, by the way. No, yeah, this breaks down the fourth wall, Jimmy. When I hold a pen, it makes me feel more comfortable, so I don't have to wear my magical sunglasses. No, look, yeah, exactly. When we talk about the players earning more respect, first I want to get your take on: do you think that we're legitimately more respected, or do we have enough players now that it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks because they're showing themselves, regardless of whether or not Christian Pulisic gets the love in his locker room, is going to be relative to him being a starter or not at the World Champions, right? And, guys playing in Champions League semifinals and quarterfinals and knockout rounds, and Jordan Pefok scoring regularly, but not even getting into the national team, 19 goals in 30-something games. Like, do you think that's our perception? And our perception was that we have enough mass that we're like, well, it doesn't really, we can call it soccer and it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks now? Or do you think the perception is actually improving of the player? And then the part 2 to that is, do you think that the elevation of the player will lift the elevation of the perception of the coach? Or do you think those are tracking on 2 different paths and we have a long ways to go on the coaching front till we reach that critical mass?
There's like 18 questions in that. I will say, maybe working backwards here, if I can remember everything you asked.
Jimmy, it's 2 questions. Don't make a big deal.
Fine,
Jimmy,
fine.
Let's go.
Listen, I feel like the player track and coaching track is different. And we're already seeing evidence of that. The player track seems to be moving in the right way. I feel like we've maybe broken through the glass ceiling in some capacity, because it's not just a one-off of Pulisic going to Chelsea. And obviously he was highly touted and highly respected. And a lot of managers would love to have a Christian Pulisic in their team and reference him and his style. And obviously having big fans of what that are big managers like Jurgen Klopp, who loves Christian Pulisic. All those little things matter and they add up as it pertains to him as a player. But now when you see a Weston McKennie, Serginho Dest, I even feel like there might have been a little smoke around him because, well, he didn't actually grow up here. He grew up in the Ajax system. So it's kind of falls into the David Wagner, Pellegrino Matarazzo.
The David Regi.
Those guys are Americans, but they didn't actually grow up in our system. But when you see a Weston McKennie grew up in our system, when you see a Pulisic who did the same for a good portion of his young life, and then you have you see the Reggie Cannons making moves and Brian Reynolds, and then it starts to I just feel like the perception has changed of the players, where we're starting to be looked at as a country with viable options. Ricardo Pepi, of course, is
Well,
the
now
most recent
now it's a
example.
buying frenzy, right?
It is.
Now that's the thing that I look at is like everybody's like, hey, we got to go get these players because they're only going to get more expensive. It's almost like crypto 2019, Jimmy. Everybody buy. We're getting all these players over.
True, that's a great point. But I would say that now it's a matter of following through. And this kind of first wave of this new generation of Pulisic and McKennie and Dest, they've proven themselves. They've gotten some action, and now they can be counted on to take on that responsibility from these clubs: Barcelona, Juventus, Chelsea. I mean, these are big clubs. And now with Ricardo Pepi making a move, now he's got to go follow through on that price tag. You know, that was a big risk for Augsburg, most expensive signing in their history. Still hasn't scored. You know, didn't even start this past weekend against Mönchengladbach. Like, okay, now how is he going to fight through that? Right now we're going back from like this collective perception to now this individual. And if he can go there and prove that they're worth the price, then I think we're going to continue to see it. But as you and I both know, and I'm sure people that are at least more tapped into it, we have a very, very exciting, 2005, 2006, or players that were born in those ages that are just going to be excellent, excellent players. And I just think that gate's open now. Now, with regard to managers, we're still a ways away. And I feel like we're going to need our own kind of Julian Nagelsmann or some kind of young wonder kid in the managerial way, where just so overly dominant in whatever they're doing. And I don't know if we've produced that just yet. Well, probably because we're doing podcasts like this. You know what I'm talking about? Me and you are like, we're sitting on all this talent and haven't really explored what our capabilities are as a coach. But I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there that would be pretty good.
I also think, by the way, and just to jump in on that point, there's also the non-player that I think we're going to see that emergence of just the education and culture around the game of players challenging themselves, or coaches challenging themselves to go the Nagelsmann route, or to go the McVay route, where they're in their mid-30s and coaching at a huge club, but maybe didn't have a background in playing the game at an elite level, play the game, know the game, love the game, but have been a student of the game their whole life. So I think that's another rounding of a corner that we could get to at a certain point. I think that's a ways out, but I think that's the critical mass of coaching education and creating more accessibility and affordability for coaches to develop our top talent, not just as players, but as coaches, because without the coaches, you can't get the players, right?
Sure.
At a certain point.
So what I'll say really quick, because I think this all kind of goes into it, we'll keep it going, is I feel like we have more than enough players that want to play in this country. And now there's more than enough places for them to do that and be seen. Our scouting could still be better. I think that's part of the conversation as well. But are we getting enough coaches the opportunity to coach at the highest levels, and or at least along the way? And now when you look at the maturation of USL right underneath MLS, you have 27 teams in the championship, 11 in League One, and 111 in League Two. And I help out a League Two team here in San Francisco called the Glens. But that is still important. Even though those seasons are short, it's still being around the environment, learning how to set a culture, how to do all that stuff. And then obviously we got thousands and thousands of youth teams. But then now you have MLS Next is coming in very soon, and they're going to start with 20 plus teams. That's just more and more opportunity for
MLS Next Pro.
MLS Next Pro, excuse me. Yeah. And it's just, you got NISA, we have a whole bunch of acronyms in this country where people can get experience. But now I think they can start to move up a ladder in a way where they can be seen as a coach. Wow, that was tremendous success. And it used to be just isolated to college, because that's kind of how the American sports landscape starts. In most other sports is, oh, wow, do they do well in college? Do you think he could do well in the pros? And then they make that jump, as they say. And now I feel like we're going to see, because there's more teams to coach, more opportunity for these coaches to have that chance. I think we will start to develop those coaches that will break through. It's just going to take a little bit longer, but our players are first.
Yeah. So here's the question I'm going to ask everybody that's watching: is who's the best American coach currently? Jimmy, I want to get your take, and obviously it's arbitrary, so don't be afraid to go out on a limb and say something stupid. But if you go down the list of just the American coaches, right? You've got sort of the classic Cadillacs of the Bruce Arenas, your old American made, classic cars, and you've got the Bob Bradleys of the world who've had, been around for a long time, and then you have your Jim Curtins and your Greg Berhalters and your Chris Armases, Jesse Marshes. I mean, there's a wide range of coaches now. Robin Fraser. I mean, Greg Vanny. I mean, there's a number of them that are now gaining a certain level of experience and still on the younger side of coaching. I mean, who out there is doing it for you in terms of being the number one. And that's not even talking about, your David Wagner and Matarazzo and others. I mean,
it's hard. And I know, again, I'm gonna run into some haters, but Bruce Arena, even he turned around New England Revolution so quickly. It's hard not to put him in the conversation. I just want to say that. And yes, I'll raise my hand and say that I'm extremely biased. He picked me to go to a World Cup team, so I'm always going to have his back. But there is something about his style.
Louise, why am I even asking you?
Management. No. But I just want to put him in the conversation because he's got a proven track record and he knows how to get the most out of players. And that was clear with the New England Revolution. Whatever you want to say to the MLS Cup playoffs, they lost in the first game, blah, 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 blah. But over 10 months, he had the best team. And then with Jesse, I was really hopeful that Jesse Marsch was really going to take those big steps with RB Leipzig, and a bit disappointed that.
But it's not that easy, right?
I know it's not that easy. I know it's not.
You inherit a team, and based on
strip them of and
you get rid of your best players. You don't get new players. You have a bunch of injuries. There's so many circumstances that go into being successful. Having said that, RB Leipzig's in 4th place now since Jesse left. Like, they've climbed back up and they're challenging for a Champions League spot.
Would they have done that had he not left? I think they probably would have, which is
they were in the bottom half of the table, it seemed like, I think, right?
But they were just managing the Champions League. You know what I mean? He's got like a whole bunch of competitions that exist in the beginning of a season that don't necessarily begin at the end. I don't know the strength of schedule that Domenico Tedesco, the new manager, has absorbed, but he got some players back. Some of them are healthy. Some of them are playing better. Andre Silva in particular. Like, I don't know. I agree with you. It's not that simple. So Jesse Marsch for sure in the conversation. And I like what Jim Curtin's doing at Philly. I love what Greg Vanney's been building in general. I thought he was very successful at Toronto FC, winning them the treble back in the day. Robin Fraser, tremendous success winning the Western Conference with Colorado Rapids last year, kind of out of nowhere. Like, these guys, as you mentioned, are getting these experiences and learning from their mistakes, right? They're getting opportunities to learn from their mistakes. And with the stakes that are as high as they are, Jesse can't do that in a top 5 European league. If you make mistakes, you're out. And we see it not only with him, Nuno Espirito Santo. Well, Spurs are a different gravy, but it happens all the time. You have like 15, 20 games, and if there's not a buy-in from the players and it's not looking good, you could be out. And unfortunately, Jesse was sacrificed for that reason. But yeah, there's plenty of coaches out there that I'm excited about, and some up and coming ones as well that deserve to be in the conversation.
I guess on that note, is there anybody that, I rattled off some names, and there's probably plenty that I haven't rattled off because, like you said, there's now this system where before the only way to really judge yourself was at the professional level. That was MLS, right? USL has always had their teams too, but now you're seeing, even though they're not all connected, you're seeing a place where you have a breeding ground for talent just by having professional high pressure opportunities for coaches to make it, right? Whether that's John Hackworth at the USL level, or across the board. I'm kind of stream of consciousness here, and you're going to continue to have more, right? You've also got a number of coaches that are the head of academies, or ex-players, that are head of academies now for MLS or USL, right, that are also coaching teams and trying to figure out their world within the player development landscape. Is there anybody that you can think of off the top of your head that we're not talking about that's been a surprise to you? If the answer is no off the top of your head, I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but is there anybody out there that you're like, hey, keep an eye on this person, they're young or male or female, that you think are worth keeping an eye on?
Well, from a female perspective, Freya Coombe, who took over Angel City, I thought she did really great work with Gotham last year, especially.
She's at the Super Bowl. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I had the benefit, I'll say this, I had the benefit of doing my coaching course with her for my A license, and just being able to be in one of those breakaway groups where I get to learn a little bit more, instead of being in a group of 40 or in a group of like 3 or 4, and just hearing her views on the game and having that insight, and then watching her Gotham FC team, like just in terms of how they possessed and what they were looking to do and the ideas that they had.
So were you in a small group with her?
I was, yeah. And it was very cool. And so I understand why Angel City plucked her away from Gotham, because, and Gotham rightfully were upset about it because they were doing good things with her. But she's a great choice. She knows the game. She's got great personality. She knows how to communicate. So I like her a lot, and I'm excited to see how Angel City do in their first year of existence. So that would be kind of my pick on the female side that maybe people haven't thought of or heard of, or haven't remembered her name like they should, but hopefully they will moving forward. And then I'm very curious to see about Steve Cherundolo, to be honest. At LAFC, they're actually going to be sharing the stadium, Angel City and LAFC. And I'm from LA, so I'm telling you, I'm not biased, but you and I both played with Steve Cherundolo we both really rate not only his ability in the game, but how he thought about the game and how he saw the game and how he was already coaching us while we were playing. I mean, in the game, there'd be something that'd be like, hey, you might want to think about just drop off like a yard because this guy, you know what I mean? He's just giving you these little insights. And imagine that in a role where he can impact the whole team in a meaningful way. And if he's got a good staff around him, which I assume he does, then I think Cherundolo's got a bright future. So those would be kind of the two names that maybe people have heard of, but maybe haven't thought could really break through. But I'm actually pretty high on those two.
Yeah. What about Der Perp says Hugo Perez?
That would be amazing. I mean, Hugo Perez for me has been around for a long time and has been a known quantity. For everybody that doesn't know, Hugo Perez is in our National Soccer Hall of Fame. He represented our country 75 to 80 times. He's now the coach of El Salvador, but he was coaching our youth national teams and had a bit of a falling out with U.S. Soccer. And I can't remember the intimate details. And hopefully we can get him on the show one day. He can tell us about it. But he would be a great choice, I think, to start in MLS, kind of get his stripes or earn his stripes there, have a couple seasons where he gets some trust. I would love to see Hugo Perez do well because I think he's gotten El Salvador to overachieve in some ways and really try to play within themselves. They don't try to be anything that they're not. And I think that's important when you're establishing an identity for any team at any level.
What about Oscar Pareja? That was one that just came to mind too, of just somebody who's done well with the youth, has now gone to the MLS level and continued to do well and build players and sign good players in a style of play and, a different background than maybe some of our other coaches. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I like Oscar Pareja. I mean, I'm old enough to say that I played against Oscar Pareja, which, makes me feel really old. But you know what I like about him, too, is that he had that chance to go down to Tijuana and manage the Xolos Cholos in Liga MX. And he's been an assistant. He's been with FC Dallas after being a player there for many years. And he coached the U17 team and then took over Colorado. Did Dallas as the head coach for a long time. Had success with down at Tijuana. Now he's back at Orlando. I don't think he's an unknown quantity. I think Oscar Pareja is a coach that's proven that he knows what he's doing. He knows the system in particular in this country, and the players love to play for him, right? And there's something about that I also know is pretty advantageous. I wish he would have stayed in Mexico a little bit longer. I wish they could have maybe taken another jump or two to another team just to see if he could have had a little bit more success than he did with the Xolos Cholos. But I'm happy he's back in MLS because I think his quality is second to none.
Well said. Well, listen, Jimmy, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a little more lovey-dovey Valentine's Day type stuff. We're going to talk about Christian Pulisic and our love for him and his love for himself. We'll be right back. All right, Jimmy, we are back. We're going to talk about this. It's Valentine's Day, so we can't talk just about being critical of Chris Armas and the bullies that exist on the internet and all the coaches that are trying to prove their way and prove it for us as a nation. I think we'll get there.
Okay, but you know what people should do? It's Valentine's Day. They should prove their love to us by hitting like and subscribe and leaving comments and doing all that good stuff. That would mean a lot to us, That
would.
I would like
We don't ask for much on Valentine's Day.
We don't.
Just a like, a subscribe.
And a warm hug. If we see each other in real life, you got to give us a warm hug and say it's for that Valentine's Day back in 2022.
Yeah, I like that. Well, listen, Jimmy, let's talk about this really candid interview that Christian Pulisic had, right? He talks about the pressures of being Captain America. And you and I have been highly critical of him, right? Going all the way back to 2018, where you could see this shift in his game where he was doing so well for us at the national team level, but I think he was only 18 at the time. But then you could see this whole, I've got to carry the team on my back. Every time I get the ball, I've got to do something great with it. And I think it was to his detriment and to the detriment of the team that the team was and it wasn't his fault. The team was going get him the ball. Just give that guy the ball because he's the one that's got it figured out. And we've seen that continue to happen throughout the years. There was a break where he wasn't in the national team, obviously, for a while they were sort of rebuilding and looking for a coach. And then as they've had him back in, I've seen sort of the same themes, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, especially on the show, of Christian Pulisic trying to do too much. And now we have the quality of the players around him that I think, actually, let me ask you this. Do you think it's because of the quality of the players around him or because he's recognized that in his game? The quality of players around him has allowed him to not have to do that. Or do you think he's had that self-recognition, or probably both, where he said, oh, there's other guys that can do things. It's not on me anymore. I don't have to be the hero. I don't have to be Captain America every single time, that I can contribute in all these other ways that could lead to wins. They just might not be on the stat sheet.
I think that he's got some time on his hands. I think he's maybe having that self-reflection that I think is important for every player to go through, every human to go through, and to understand my role. Why am I here? Why do I do what I do? I remember very similarly at age 23 thinking the same things, like, why am I wired this way? And I found out, and this might be getting a little bit too deep, but I found out my parents had me when they're 18 years old, and I always just wanted to. And as I got older, I learned insights about how they wanted to give me up for adoption. And obviously abortion was an option, and all that type of stuff, right? They're young kids having babies out there. And when I got to a certain age, I'm like, why am I wired to have to be the way that I am? And it dawned on me that the better that I was and the more that I accomplished, the more it would look like my parents made a good decision by keeping me. And I had that epiphany at age 23. And I was reading more books and just kind of in that self-exploration thing. And it was a really important moment for me. Now, I didn't change the way I was. I'm wired how I'm wired. And I was shaped the way I was shaped. And I've owned it, and I take responsibility for it, good and bad, right? But I feel like he's starting to enter into this where he's starting to think about things a little bit more. And I think it's a really important part of his journey. And also, at the same time, what I find interesting about these comments is that they comes after the point where we didn't have him for a couple windows. We weren't relying on him anymore. And now he feels, and we did okay. And now he feels like he has to save us after we've already proven that we can be okay without him. That's an interesting timing for that. Now I feel like he's kind of thinking back to the games prior and the moments and the window of time that you're talking about when he wasn't thinking so much. He's just getting out there, lacing up his boots and going.
Yeah.
And now I think he's thinking a little bit more. I think Tuchel's living maybe a little rent-free in his head, and that's going to open up, more things about what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish. And obviously he was part of the 2018 World Cup team that didn't qualify, but he wasn't the reason why we didn't qualify. There are a lot of other reasons. But he had to live with that. He had to live with not qualifying in his first experience and his first go around. And hopefully that would make him stronger. But he also had comments prior to that window. Remember when he came in, he was like, yeah, there's two versions of me. Like, I just think he's in his feelings right now. And again, I don't think there's anything negative about that. And I don't want to hold that against him. I just feel like he's at that age, at age 23, where you start to kind of tap into something maybe a little bit deeper than you had previously when you were just kind of reacting and living your life without really thinking too much about it.
Yeah, and just to get into some of the quotes for some of you that haven't seen the interview, here's one where he says, "Sometimes it is tough. I still haven't completely learned, especially going back to the U.S. Sometimes I put too much pressure on myself that I need to do something special where I just need to play the best where I just need to play the best that I can, do what I can do, and hopefully people recognize that." And obviously, I'm putting two of those things together, but it seems like when he plays simply, and oddly, actually, to take a step back from that, what I've found is that when I look up stuff on him, when I'm looking for interviews, there are times that I'm like, dude, this guy would be super fun to hang out with. He's so cool. And then I see the other side of him, which is like chin down, sad, monotone, doing this so I don't get fined type of thing, or almost like, which could be perceived as shy. It could be perceived as him being a dick and too good for the people that he's talking to, lack of confidence. It could be a number of things, right? And then I see him do some other things where he just lets go and you go, who's that guy? That guy is super funny. He's super dialed in. He's listening really well. He's vulnerable. And like you said, I think he's going through all this now of like, because we've always talked about this to continue on this theme. Like, who's going to be the superstar, right? Weston McKennie, right? He's got his celebration, his Harry Potter celebration. He's got the cool hair. He's got this style to him. He's got this energy. He's magnetic. And he's playing at a huge club. And you go, Pulisic is a better player and more talented and in more position of influence. I wish he was just like the guy, But sometimes I see that out of him. And it just seems like he's certainly going through that. Do you? Yeah, I don't know.
No, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in right there and throw a question back at you, and then I'm going to kind of bring up a point that I think is important. Do you feel like Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan were the guys in the way that I think you're explaining? Because sometimes they were in their feelings, sometimes their heads went down, and they didn't want to interact with anybody. So I'm kind of curious because
Landon is like the shy version of Pulisic for sure. Like, he wasn't the personality, he wasn't the face. He took that on because he had to. I don't think he necessarily loved it or liked it.
I feel like Pulisic falls into the same category, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's in that category that the Landon side is on. Clint was more of like your star player that didn't mind having to be a dick, wasn't mind saying what was on his mind and on his heart, and wore his,
he's kind of like McKennie.
Yeah, he's kind of like McKennie. But we haven't had, it's kind of like you want the Pulisic
winning everything at Chelsea to also be the star, but you want him to be approachable. And it's like this unrealistic figure that we've created of them, right? But my point is that Clint was pretty consistent in what you saw him. He was down to banter, down to have fun, but like he'd also put his elbow through your nose if you got in his way. And Landon was a little bit different and quiet and more introverted, but was expected to be funny and superstar and like, you know, on the level of the LeBron Jameses of the world or the Kobe Bryants of that era. And so, you know, we create this unrealistic expectation of what we expect him to be. But sometimes I see Christian Pulisic in the media or doing some fun interviews, and I'm like, this guy's having a ton of fun, and he's cool, and he's like down to earth, and he's relatable to me. Where I'm like, dude, I want to hit this guy up and hang. Where there's other times I'm like, dude, I want to be around that guy. You know, he doesn't seem fun. He doesn't seem.
He's the Eeyore.
Yeah,
Eeyore. Everything's bad. Everything sucks. I don't know if he's that bad, but Eeyore just is what jumped into my brain. I remember when we first gave the captain's armband to Christian Pulisic, and I thought it was a big mistake because that was going to add that type of pressure. It was going to also start to add that moniker of Captain America, and then ultimately that as he has success with Chelsea, as he wins the Champions League, even though he didn't start that game and he missed a good opportunity to make it 2-0 and all the little details that a lot of people forget. He's a Champions League winner, and he was there holding the trophy at the end, and that was very cool. We had another American Champions League winner. That was Jovan Kirovski, but he didn't actually play in the game for Borussia Dortmund. But Pulisic did, and he was a contributing member, like a legitimate contributing member to that, and not to cheapen anything that Jovan's done. That was pretty cool that he did that. But when we gave him the captain's armband, and you start to add that into all of the success that he's had with the club that's winning a whole bunch of trophies, now you're going to start to get that he's the LeBron James of soccer. And that just starts to put him in a position where we might have overhyped him. And that's really unfair to him. We have a big tendency in this country, especially in soccer, to overhype our players. You know, they have just a sniff of some success.
But Jimmy, he used to take over games at Dortmund, though, at like 17, 18 years old.
And Chelsea. When he first went to Chelsea, I was like, who is this guy? He scored like 10 goals in 14 games or something crazy. I mean, he was like unbelievable. And then it's hard to maintain that. Not only because people are going to start to figure out, other teams start to set up for you. They're understanding your tendencies, how to slow you down. They know that you don't really respond well after you get kicked, right? These are all these things that you have to now take into consideration as we think about his evolution. Is he better than he was when he was at Dortmund doing that? Or was he when he first came to Chelsea? What's honestly crazy is he probably is better, but he's just not showing it as much because it's harder for him to have that success because other teams know who he is and what he's about. And Tuchel's maybe not playing him in his best spot consistently. So he's got that type of competition, but that exists for everybody. Even the great Cristiano Ronaldo's having to deal with that at Manchester United. So this isn't isolated to an American or Christian Pulisic. This all happens to everybody around the world, no matter who you are outside of maybe Messi, and Mbappe. But I would say that when we gave him the captain's armband, I thought that was setting him up to fail because he never demonstrated anything that I thought lent itself to being a great leader. And we really just need him to focus on doing what you say, just grabbing the game by the grip of the neck and just running at people and trying to change it and influence it that way, and leave the leadership to the guys that already have that natural ability, where I don't think that doesn't emanate from his pores. You can see it. Tyler Adams, you can see it. Like, he should be wearing the armband. Walker Zimmerman, you know, even our goalkeepers, they have a little bit more of that. And so when I saw him wearing the captain's armband for the first game in this last window, I'm like, what are we doing, dude? So
okay. So then let me, that gets me to my next point, to go back to what you were saying, which is like, you go through this self-realization, right? And Bailey Marshall saying he thinks Greg has a huge influence on his poor confidence, and agrees with Jimmy here.
Thanks.
He goes through the self-realization, right? And he comes out of the back end of it of, I am who I am, right? And I can live within these parameters of who I am, like you had mentioned before that you went through. Who is that Christian Pulisic? Like, what is he a captain? And if he's not, what is his role within the national team? What are the expectations we can set for him and he can live up to, or he can set for himself and live up to, that, you know, ambitions are to be the best player in the world? Like, who is the Christian Pulisic when he eventually looks in the mirror and accepts, I am who I am?
He needs to figure that out. I mean, that's what I think he's working through right now, because he's going to come to a crossroads in the summer. Do I stay with Chelsea and keep fighting it out here, knowing that they want to go get Ousmane Dembele and they want to go get, you know, whatever other talented wingers are out there, and just continue to add more and more challenges for him to get playing time? Or does he want to go, and it's going to feel like a step back for him, because he's leaving from whatever you think about the FIFA Club World Cup, he's leaving the world champions, the best club in the world currently at this particular moment, based on the competitions that are out there. And he's going to probably feel like it's a step back wherever he goes. And I don't know. I don't know who's around him, who's surrounding him, but it could be one step back for two steps forward. And he's got to be able to see that kind of light at the end of
maybe a
tunnel.
Bayern Munich or something like that. Like,
Bayern Munich? What you got Gnabry, you got Leroy Sané. Like, it's where, I mean, okay, then he's a spot starter again. I mean, I actually thought Sevilla would have been a great spot for him, but Anthony Martial went there, and I know that's only a loan, so maybe he can still end up there. It's a good league, obviously. They're playing in competitions. They're very well coached, and I think that would be a nice spot, right? You're in with a team that maybe isn't the top tier, but you're like right there. I mean, Sevilla's should be. I mean, they're second in La Liga. They're going to be probably trying to win the Europa League again because they're hosting the final, and you have that. That's just one team that jumped out because I saw that he was linked with them. But there might be a team in Italy as well. I mean, I could see him at Inter Milan. I could see him at AC Milan, even though they've got Leao and they've got Brahim Diaz, and they got their own playmakers out there. But he could fit in a lot of different clubs that are still, good clubs. And Chelsea just might not be the right fit for him at this time because he feels like he's got that super sub tag to him under Thomas Tuchel, and I think he's got to go lose that and kind of reimagine himself somewhere else.
Do you think that this is? And I he's 23, so he's got plenty of time to get better. But do you think this is the Pulisic that we are going to see? I mean, I know he's got room to get better, but is this what you think is the best?
That's a great question, by the way.
Like just because I think about the injuries, he's had a lot for his age. The situations of like, does the situation get better?
Wow.
I mean, if he goes somewhere and he's comfortable,
that is an unbelievable question. Heath, have we seen peak Christian Pulisic? Have we already seen him at his best? That is a wild question. And you could make an argument that maybe we have, which is a crazy thing to entertain. I don't think that we have. We all hope that we haven't seen it. We got 2 World Cups left for sure at a minimum with this guy, which hopefully we qualify in 2022. We host in 26. I mean, we want that guy in peak. He'll be 27 in 2026. I mean, that is as peak as it gets in terms of a player's career on average, right? That's when you're usually hitting your peak. Yeah. So no, of course, I don't think I don't want to think that, but it's crazy to imagine that could be a possibility because of the injuries, because of where he is currently mentally, and that it might take him a little bit of time. And in that time, he could not be playing for Chelsea anymore. Yeah. He could be taking that step back. And then what happens if he goes to a Sevilla or an AC Milan and he doesn't play? Now he's kind of in the same boat that he was at Chelsea. He's just at a quote unquote club that's not as successful at the moment. That's tricky, dude. It gets tricky. And then all of a sudden you can't get out of your own way. I mean, we never talk about this side of the game a lot. We always talk technical, tactical, physical, but the mental side is really what's going to separate the great from the good. And I think we've seen great moments from him, but his career is so young, it's hard to say, if he's going to be considered great consistently.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with him. Is I look at things and I go, when he is at his very best, I put him in the category of world class. And not world class for an American.
No question.
But those gaps are widening between when you see him at world class, injuries, not playing, these things that all exist in between, right? And he's not the only one, right? We talk about Ousmane Dembele has the same issues. Like there's all these players that have this tag of if fit and at their best, they are world class. But how often do you get them, right? What's the ROI on that if you're a club? How many chances do you get every time you come back from an injury? How long do those injuries last? How long are you fit until you have something else come up? And he just seems to have that sort of body type that you're constantly dealing with something that how long until that lives and, kind of buys a nice little condo inside of his head for the rest of his career, where granted, I think he'll continue to be at a big club and a performer and all these things that we see him where we all just go, shit, that's amazing. But I just wonder, like, are we going to continue to have this conversation for the next 4 years of like, when he's at his best, he's world class, but he's injured all the time and whatever. And so I just wonder what else could happen. Like, is it a full season without injury? Is it a full season of playing without injury that could make him round the corner to go a step higher? Are we seeing kind of 2 years straight of what it's going to be for the rest of his career?
I think that Christian Pulisic, for him to hit his potential, he needs a coach that truly believes in him, that relies on him to be the guy. And
Didn't
we
Thomas
saw
Tuchel, wasn't he his guy at Dortmund?
I don't think, no, he brought him along and he was a super sub for Tuchel in some capacity. And I think there was moments, I think Tuchel believes in him, but he believes in him in a certain role. I think the way that Tuchel kind of sees the game, he puts you in a spot, and then you got to maximize that. And at Chelsea, unfortunately, he's got a lot of options.
It's a weird thing, by the way, at Chelsea to be the best team in the world, but chasing a trophy and chasing every trophy that there is no. It's not like I don't know.
I don't know who their best 11. I don't even know who their best 11 is. And I think they're still trying to figure that out, especially in the front five. When everybody's healthy, I think their back five is pretty set, and they're holding midfielders, and the goalkeeper. But like that front 3-4, I don't know if they figured that out, even with Lukaku there. So I don't know. It's interesting times for Christian Pulisic, and we have his back, man. I want to see him go out there and start kicking ass and taking names, and we want to see more of that because we've seen it before, and we want to see it again. But I feel like he's a player, especially right now, maybe at this kind of vulnerable moment for him, where he's been so candid in the last couple of interviews, where he's speaking about his vulnerabilities and where he is and what he's trying to work through. And I love that he's being that candid, but he could really use a coach that, hey, I believe in you. Just, you're my guy. Not to say that Greg Berhalter isn't saying that to him, but because he already kind of sees the U.S. and playing for the U.S. in a certain way, where he's already kind of been or trying to be the savior for a long time, I don't think it has the same type of impact. I'm thinking more from a club perspective that he might need to go to an environment where the coach is like, you're my guy. You might play bad one game. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit you for a month. We're going to continue to roll you out. And I think he would really blossom in that type of environment. But does that exist at the highest levels where he wants to play and cut his teeth? I'm not so sure, but I'd take him at Newcastle. That's my favorite thing.
I mean, you had everything to do with Almiron, who's a pacey winger. And
he doesn't play anymore.
Underutilized. But listen, everybody, here's your one call to action for the day. Like this video.
Do it.
You got to do it. And by the way, Gabe came up here and said happy birthday to you. Jimmy, happy late birthday. Gabe, I don't know if you were here from the beginning, but Jimmy did say for his birthday present, what he wants is for you to like the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Jimmy, we are almost to the end of our USMNT hour for today. We had a very light script in terms of the two subjects we wanted to hit on. I think we hit on those pretty well. Is there any other subject matter that you wanted to discuss today?
We should talk about Jordan Pefok because he just scored again this weekend. He's got 19 goals in 31 games, 3 assists on top of that. So 22 goal contributions in 31 games this season in all competitions. And the fact that he can't get a sniff in our last couple windows is a bit disappointing. Now, I feel like he's getting to a point where his numbers are undeniable. And whether you really had him in your plans or not, you have to bring him in. And I say that because you need to set a precedent as a coach that if you're playing well, I'm going to reward you with at least a call in. You might not need to play the guy, but you have to let it.
It's like Jared Bowen for West Ham.
Yes, exactly right.
You might not be so well.
Maybe
you're not world class. Eventually, you got to go. Like they speak for themselves. Like I don't have room for you. I don't really see it. But you're literally kicking my door down, and therefore, like you're in until you're out.
100%. And I think the knock on Pefok is that maybe he doesn't press the way that Greg likes, or he's not maybe as mobile as a Pepe or a Sargent or a Ferreira or whoever. But there has to be a role for him, in some capacity, especially if he's playing as well as he is. And we've seen it in the past. We've talked about it before that even Bob Bradley, he brought in Hercules Gomez, Edson Buttle, like guys you never thought in a million years would be potentially considered as World Cup quality. And that sounds harsh. Sorry to those guys, but like they were playing so well at the time that they showed that they could and deserved to get called in and to represent our country in a World Cup. And I feel like Jordan Pefok is putting himself in that position where it's so undeniable you have to call him in as well.
Yeah, and not only are he's scored for the national team, he's scored in Champions League, was it Champions League? Yeah, Champions League.
Yeah, Manchester United.
Yeah, he's scoring in the league, and you could call his league goals 3/4 of a goal because of the league that he's playing in. If that's how you wanted to hold him against that, and maybe you hold that against him, but it's undeniable his ability to score goals, and I think. That's the part that I'm excited about. He's 25 years old now. This is his run, right? He might be past the window come 4 years from now for the U.S. World Cup. Who knows? You never know with a striker. But this is where you want to go with that gut instinct to know this guy could be the difference maker. You haven't put him in to these qualifiers in a way that could be impactful. You haven't tried him out in these. And again, I know we're coming down to the edge. We're in our final 3 games, which makes it really hard. But I don't know. You got your home game against Panama.
You bring him in, man. You 100% bring him in. There's no question in my mind.
So yeah, I think there's a solid shout there. Obviously, the other thing worth mentioning is right now it's seen as illness for Gio Reyna, who we've also expected and we're hoping to come back. He's out till the end of February with said sickness, according to the internet. Again, that's speculating a little bit. I don't have any tangible information. He wasn't on the bench this weekend. I thought.
Well, you know what? We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Next week, U.S. Men's National Team out. We'll have more insight on Gio Reyna if it's not out already.
Yeah, I like that. So listen, Jimmy, we're going to wrap this thing up.
Cool.
But make sure everybody continues to tune in, that you're subscribed. And the UCL preview is live on YouTube and dropping at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the podcast feed. And keep your eyes and ears peeled on the Qué Golazo feeds tomorrow, because our friend LME, Luis Miguel Echegaray, world exclusive interview with AFCON champion and Liverpool star Sadio Mane, which is pretty unbelievable. And live UCL recaps on Tuesday and Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, right on the YouTubes. And that's it for Jimmy and I from this USMNT hour. And of course, on behalf of Des Norris, myself, and Jimmy Conrad, we are out. Peace.
Later.